Welcome to my channel where a crazy HOA Karen gets arrested. If you guys remember in a previous video we did on this series, there was a woman whose whole house was behind an HOA, and the HOA was constantly giving her tickets for literally everything. At one point, they even told her that she had to cut down some of her trees because they were too big. But those trees were planted before the HOA even existed, and if you have, then you know how annoying it is when your package gets stolen off your porch. Just imagine if someone was stealing your Amazon packages every single day. That's exactly what was happening to people living in a neighborhood in Texas. Anyway, enough with the small backstory. Let's get into the juicy stuff. Apparently it was the HOA president herself. She was the one behind all of the thefts. You'd probably freak out and wonder what they were doing. Well, that's exactly what happened to a Reddit user. But sometimes mail goes missing. If this happens, it can be very annoying, especially if it's important mail. Eventually the police got involved and asked people if they had any security cameras. Most people love having pets, but sometimes they can be annoying. Dogs can bark all day, cats can scream at night, and you may get complaints from your neighbors. So the HOA was wrong. But the officers decided to check out the HOA Karen's yard just to see what she was complaining about. And that's when they made a shocking discovery. Inside her garage, they found a whole zoo of exotic animals. Some of the animals included a full-grown ostrich, peacocks, pigs, goats, and sheep. It turned out the HOA Karen committed a federal crime. The HOA Karen tried to defend herself in court, but she couldn't argue with the facts. She had to admit what she did and apologize. Afterwards, she became known as the weird lady from the gated community, and everybody avoided her. The HOA Karen had been hiding all these animals inside her garage and feeding them. She wasn't able to take care of them properly, which put her and her family in danger. The animal control officers were forced to seize all the animals and take them to a wildlife sanctuary. And while the HOA Karen was fined for keeping dangerous animals, the cops also arrested her for animal cruelty. But if you have an HOA, your neighbors might be a little more sensitive than usual. One person did, and it captured the HOA Karen taking their mailbox. That's when the police decided to raid her house. The woman owned 3 chickens, which according to her HOA were considered livestock. Even though she had no idea how her chickens were livestock, she decided to just ignore the complaint. Then she received another one, then another, and soon enough, her phone was blowing up. She was receiving complaints daily, multiple times a day. So she decided to do something drastic. She called animal control. They were expecting to find a few mailboxes, maybe around 10 or so, but they found something much worse. When they searched her garage, they found 47 mailboxes, all pried open and stacked like trophies. Having a strict set of rules is important when living in an HOA community. The rules are there to ensure that the neighborhood remains a nice place to live. But one HOA Karen took things too far when she began filing fake complaints against her neighbors. The police were shocked, but this HOA Karen was even more shocked when they arrested her. She complained about everything: cars parked in driveways, kids playing, dogs barking, you name it. She complained about it, but nobody paid attention to her until she started to target a certain neighbor. The neighbor had recently gotten into a dispute with the HOA Karen. So the HOA Karen decided to file over 200 false violation complaints against her. She hoped this would get the neighbor kicked out, but she messed with the wrong person. That's because the neighbor was actually an attorney. And that's exactly what happened to people in a Florida neighborhood. He was so confused when he saw the private investigator outside his house. That's because his HOA president had hired a pie to spy on him. We've all had neighbors who think they're better than us. But the Reddit user knew something was up, so he filed a request to see the HOA's finances. And when he got the documents, he was shocked. Turns out his HOA president was using the community money to hire private investigators to spy on people. She was spying on who knows how many people. It was only a matter of time before someone realized what she was doing and stopped. The Reddit user wrote, "I contacted the state and informed them of the situation. Later that day, my HOA received a visit from 2 investigators. Hopefully, she learned her lesson about invading people's privacy. These types of neighbors often try to force others to do things their way, even if it's not required." This happened to a Reddit user and their HOA Karen neighbor. The HOA Karen was always telling the Reddit user to raise their fence. She kept saying that she didn't like seeing into their backyard, but the Reddit user never did anything because they liked being able to see outside. One resident actually managed to catch her on a hidden camera. She filed a complaint, and soon enough the HOA issued the Reddit user a fine for not fixing their fence. They couldn't believe it, so they decided to fight back. The Reddit user went to the county office to ask about permits. They wanted to know if their neighbor had a permit to build their fence. And turns out their neighbor didn't have a permit. Not only that, but the HOA Karen's fence was too tall, which meant it had to go. The Reddit user then called the cops and told them what was happening. When they arrived, the HOA, all this time, the Reddit user was recording the whole thing on camera. As soon as the HOA saw what was happening, they called the police again. They tried to say that the Reddit user destroyed their fence, but the Reddit user played the footage and it was obvious that it was the county who did it. The HOA Karen was furious, but she still got arrested for building an illegal structure. The HOA Karen would walk up to people's houses, check to see if anyone was home, and then take their package if the coast was clear. But it all came to an end when one resident posted footage of her stealing his package online. Soon enough, other residents began coming forward saying that they also had their packages stolen. Of course, everyone wanted the police to get involved, but the cops didn't care about petty theft like that. However, once more people came forward with more evidence, the HOA Karen was finally kicked out of the group, and hopefully she learned a lesson about stealing other people's stuff. In today's video, we will be following up on an HOA Karen story, the secret tunnel behind a fence. Have you ever seen an HOA Karen lose their mind over nothing? Well, this happened to a man from Colorado. And as the HOA Karen began to complain more and more, the man decided he had enough. He dug out the tunnel in order to sneak into the HOA Karen's pool. It was a very risky thing to do, but a cop wasn't gonna lie, it was pretty genius. Although the cops never ended up finding the tunnel, they did find something much worse. In fact, it was so bad that the cops ended up arresting the HOA Karen right away. We don't know what was in the tunnel, but whatever it was must have been very good, because the man has never heard his HOA Karen neighbor complain since. That's when he called the cops and gave him a little warning. He warned the police that they should be prepared for anything when they arrived at his neighbor's house. He didn't tell them why or anything, just that they needed to be prepared. When the police officers showed up, they went to the back of the house. Badass, because they were looking for a tunnel that went from the HOA Karen's backyard to his backyard. According to the guy, his neighbor kept complaining about him not cutting his grass. But how could she see if she had a wall built between their houses? Well, that's when he noticed the tunnel was covered with bushes and other plants, so no one would ever notice it unless they were looking specifically for it. It turned out the tunnel was dug out by the man's son, who wasn't exactly the best at making decisions. She was stealing everyone's Amazon packages. If you live in a home, chances are at some point you've ordered something from Amazon. Everyone was wondering who was taking the packages until a Reddit user came forward with the most unexpected answer. She'll find me for my fence height, but she never had a permit to build hers. Well, one day the HOA Karen took matters into her own hands. She hired private investigators to spy on families. Imagine coming home to a private investigator waiting outside your house. He thought maybe he had done something wrong, but it turned out his HOA president was just trying to catch him violating some obscure rule. She had 47 mailboxes hidden in her garage. The United States Postal Service is responsible for delivering mail to every address in the country. People started noticing that their mail wasn't getting delivered, and when they went to check their mailboxes, it was gone. Animal control called after HOA backyard complaint. They found something worse. One woman found that out the hard way when she received a complaint from her HOA about her chickens. And when the animal control officers arrived, they looked at her chickens and said that they weren't livestock. She filed 200+ fake HOA violations. Now she's facing federal charges. This HOA Karen lived in a Florida-gated community, and she hated when people broke the rules. He decided to file a lawsuit against her, but that didn't work, so he decided to file a criminal complaint instead. That's all for this video.